did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future.
Quiet Riot.
Hello, and welcome to Quiet Riot Midnight Mass. I'm Andreou. So tonight is the night of the vice presidential debate between Kamala Harris's running mate, the governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, and Donald Trump's pick, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance. It's about 1:40 a.m. London time. The debate starts in about 20 minutes, and I thought I would mix it up, the now familiar format, by recording a few very brief thoughts ahead of the debate on what I think the challenges for each are, the strengths, the weaknesses, and the pitfalls, and what I will be looking out for, then jump back on after the debate and tell you how I thought it went against that framework. Scary. Not often one can make themselves look an absolute fool on their own podcast in the space of an hour. But we don't do things by halves here at QRHQ. Right, so here it goes. First of all, why should we care? Vice presidential debates rarely matter and rarely make a difference. The first televised one took place in 1976, 16 years after the first televised presidential debate. But what happened in those 16 years was that twice the vice president had to take over the presidency. Lyndon B. Johnson after the assassination of JFK, and then Gerald Ford after Nixon was forced to resign by the Watergate scandal. At that point, people started paying a lot more attention to the vice president, right? Political scientists, generally speaking, agree that there has only been one very clear occasion where the VP debate made a palpable difference, and that's the 2008 debate between Joe Biden and Sarah Palin during Obama's first run against John McCain. Obama's inexperience, I think, made voters much more interested in Biden, and McCain's age made them more interested in the inexperienced Palin. It seems to me we are in that sort of territory with this one. It feels important, and it feels important for many reasons. One, undecided voters, I think, will again be looking to Walz and Vance for reassurance of whatever doubts they might have about the top of their respective tickets. Two, both VP candidates unusually have strong, established views on an issue that has emerged as one of the most important ones in this election, reproductive rights. Three, the race is on a knife edge, with most swing states within the margin of error in the polls. And finally, I think, with Trump having chickened out of another debate with Harris, this may be the last battle a month out from the election, and with early voting already open in several states and opening in many others in the next week, this might be the last debate that we see. Now, let me be controversial. I think Vance is the favourite. Narrowly, but the favourite. Why do I say this? He comes into this debate with a whopping negative favourability rating of almost 11 points and growing. Walz, in contrast, has had a small but stable positive rating throughout the campaign. So Vance has nothing to lose from this, and Walz has something to protect. I think that puts them in fundamentally different positions. Also, Tim Walz's repertoire, I think, is devastating, but a little limited. I have watched several of his rallies, and if I were prepping Vance, there would be 5 or 6 lines that I know will come up and can prepare to rebut. Vance is a Yale lawyer, and he's been prepping for a month. Although I have to say, Walz has been prepping with Pete Buttigieg playing Vance, and I cannot think of anyone better. But all that aside, I think still if Vance has a couple of devastating comebacks ready to go to Walz's stock lines, those might be the clips that go viral. The last point is that Walz is going out there trying to balance difficult policy issues, speaking to multiple audiences, to Jewish voters, to Arab voters, to unions, to businesses. And if we look at the things that are in the news at the moment, what's going on in the Middle East or the strikes going on, I think he has quite a difficult job. Vance, on the other hand, is speaking to an audience of one, the hostile boss, the withholding father that he knows already dislikes and regrets him, Donald Trump. No triangulation or nuance needed on that one. He knows how to please him. Now, what are the pitfalls for each? They are sort of the reverse of their strength. Walz is likeable. But as Palin showed in 2008, that folksiness can occasionally come across as naivety. His attacks on Vance may feel very differently, saying, gosh, he's weird, to a friendly audience cheering, as opposed to saying, you're weird, to someone opposite you in a studio with no audience. So he may be actually risking that likability. He has to play that very carefully. On the other hand, Vance lacks relatability. He's a little bit weird. He's a little bit like an alien. If he ends up looking smug, looking like a Yale candidate, superior, debating as if this is a debating society, he could really compound that unlikability. Nobody likes a smarty pants, and Vance occasionally reeks of that. I think overall I would be happy with a score draw. Anyway, the debate is about to start. I see on my screen, so I'll speak to you at the other end.
Quiet, Riot.
Right. Well, that was 2 hours of my life I'm never getting back. I think Vance won that. Walz was visibly nervous. He settled down as the debate went on. Vance was incredibly cool, maybe too cool, polished. Slick is, I think, the word you will hear a lot. I guess slick is something a lot of people will like, but will Trump's base. On the debate generally, I would say there was not enough time left for each topic. They tried to cram too much in there. All of it was hurried. I mean, how would you solve the conflict in the Middle East? You have 2 minutes is an objectively ludicrous thing for anyone to say. However, I would say there is a big sting in this tale, so stay with me. So, J.D. Vance was, first of all, asked the question about Israel and Iran, and devoted more than half his answer to an introduction of who he is, where he grew up. I mean, introducing himself to America. Was that clever? Was it weird, with the possibility of World War III kicking off, saying me, me, me? I don't know. He did this a few times during the debate, harked back to his childhood and how he understands poverty and understands the struggle of people. To be honest, whoever that J.D. Vance was, he did not sit well with a rich lawyer on our screen. So that seemed quite inauthentic. He answered a lot of questions with reference to Trump. So he answered, for instance, on Iran. The argument was essentially that strong men are good because other strong men fear them. In his response, Walz spoke about Trump doing away with the Iran nuclear deal, which is why we find ourselves in this situation. On climate change, linked to the hurricane that just happened in the States, Vance was really quite climate denying. I mean, he accepted the idea that carbon emissions drive climate change, and I quote, for the sake of argument. I would say Walz won this section quite convincingly, actually. Brought up Trump, rejecting it as a host, saying that it will create more seafront properties, and spoke from quite a personal place, saying, my farmers know climate change is real. Vance, in contrast, thinks that clean energy is just a slogan.
Senator Vance has said that there's a climate problem in the past. Donald Trump called it a hoax and then joked that these things would make more beachfront property to be able to invest in. What we've seen out of the Harris administration now, the Biden-Harris administration, is we've seen this investment. We've seen massive investments, the biggest in global history that we've seen in the Inflation Reduction Act, has created jobs all across the country. 2,000 in Jeffersonville, Ohio, taking the EV technology that we invented and making it here. 200,000 jobs across the country. The largest solar manufacturing plant in North America sits in Minnesota. But my farmers know climate change is real. They've seen 500-year droughts, 500-year floods back to back.
Next came immigration. Immigration should have been Vance's strongest topic on paper. He suggested that real leadership would be for Harris to say, I screwed up, and go back to Trump's policies. Walz went hard on the fact that they had drafted a bipartisan bill that would have fixed a lot of the problems on the border, and attacked Trump for ordering his party to vote against it. Because without immigration, what would Trump talk about, he said.
Donald Trump said no, told them to vote against it because it gives him a campaign issue. It gives him to, what would Donald Trump talk about if we actually did some of these things? And they need to be done by the legislature. You can't just do this through the executive branch. So look, we have the options to do this. Donald Trump had 4 years. He had 4 years to do this. And he promised you, America, how easy it would be. I'll build you a big, beautiful wall, and Mexico will pay for it. Less than 2% of that wall got built, and Mexico didn't pay a dime. But here we are again, 9 years after he came down that escalator. So that's where we're at. Pass the bill, she'll sign it.
So actually, Walz managed to be much stronger in this section than I would have expected. And Vance really didn't make a lot of it. Then they got into all this stuff about Springfield and the lies he had told about Haitians there eating cats and dogs. He got upset when he was fact-checked on that and was going on and on and on to the point where the moderators actually had to cut his mic off. And by this point, I think he had begun to fall a little bit into the trap of sounding too clever by half.
That is not a person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That
Thank
is
you,
the
Senator.
Facilitation of illegal immigration, Margaret, by
Thank
our
you,
own
Senator, for
leadership.
describing the legal process. We have so much to get to, Senator.
Those laws have been on the books since 1990.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The
we
CBP
want to have...
app has not been on the books since 1990. It's something that Kamala Harris created, Margaret.
Gentlemen, the audience can't hear you because your mics are cut. We have so much we want to get to. Thank you for explaining the legal process.
Both were quite strong on the economy, actually. Walz talked about Trump thinking he has all the answers and ignoring experts. Vance had a strong reply to that. The economic facts, generally speaking, favour the Trump ticket anyway, because by accident of timing, they presided over a time where wages were rising above inflation, and then the pandemic happened and Biden-Harris took over, and they presided over a time that experienced the trauma that followed that pandemic and those lockdowns. So Walz had probably the trickiest moment of the debate, where he was asked about some weird stuff about when he was in Hong Kong, and apparently he got that wrong by a couple of months. He had said in an interview that he was there during the protest, but it turned out he was there a couple of months after the protests, and he fudged his answer on this. Instead of saying, look, I misspoke, he sort of made it quite awkward. But I don't think this is something that anyone in particular cares about, to be honest, as an issue. Vance was challenged about the things he had said about Trump being the next Hitler and stuff like that. He fudged that and went wildly off topic, talking about value tax and wages. And I mean, he simply did not answer the question. And the moderators absolutely let him get away with murder on that. Then came reproductive rights. Walz's strongest topic by far. He spoke more slowly than he had done before, because before he was being very fast, occasionally garbled. But on this, he spoke slowly, he spoke with authority, with conviction, he connected with what he was saying. So he had some very strong lines on that.
There's a young woman named Amber Thurman. She happened to be in Georgia, a restrictive state. Because of that, she had to travel a long distance to North Carolina to try and get her care. Amber Thurman died in that journey back and forth. The fact of the matter is, how can we as a nation say that your life and your rights, as basic as the right to control your own body, is determined on geography?
And when he was accused of being pro-abortion, he replied, no, we're not. We're pro-women. We're pro-liberty. It was a very, very strong section for him. Vance got an absolute pasting on this issue. His counterpoint was that this is for the good of the women who feel they have no option, who want to keep their baby but feel they have no... I mean, exactly how limiting their options give them more options, I couldn't tell you. Again, Walz came back very, very strongly by saying, look, having reproductive autonomy does not mean we can't put money into school meals. We can't put money into childcare. Those things can go in parallel. It was a very, very bad section for Vance. It was really his weakest bit, and I suspect will generate quite a lot of poor clips for him. Then there was a break. They then went on gun ownership, school shootings. Walz said his son witnessed the shooting. Vance replied with, I didn't know that, Lord have mercy. I mean, I'll be honest, this stuff I have no radar for. It might go down terrifically in the US. To me, all the sort of evangelical stuff is quite strange in a political debate. Walz, again, was quite strong. I mean, he said, as a gun owner who is not against gun ownership per se, he gave some solid examples. He rejected the glib point, that guns don't kill people, whatever. He actually said sometimes it's the guns. Sometimes it is just the guns. There were various sections on housing, home ownership, rent, the cost of living. Walz grew in stature, settled down a little bit. Vance, as I said, was incredibly slick. Is slick something that the Republican base looks for? Might be good for him in 2028. Does it help Trump now? I'm not sure. Walz, again, sort of was collegiate. He agreed with him a lot. He had done this a lot throughout the debate. He said, look, we probably agree. We could sort this out. We can try and work cross-party. And I think it was at that point that Walz's brief became quite clear to me. It wasn't really about this debate. It was about making the ticket look moderate. And I think on this he succeeded. He came across as really almost too reasonable a person. And then came really the moment of the debate. If the debate had ended at this point, I would have said Vance walked it. But the final question was on democracy, on certifying the election, on accepting the result. Vance fudged, defended Trump, doubled down. He outrageously suggested that 6th of January was effectively nothing to see. He said, look, Trump left the White House, Biden took over, what's the problem? I mean, how could he fall in such a huge elephant trap? He must have known this was going to come. This will outrage Trump, his election-denying supporters, because he didn't double down strongly enough. He sort of failed to say that Trump had lost the election, but he didn't double down on the lie that it had been stolen. So that will upset that segment, but it will worry moderates and turn off undecideds, and really left an open goal to Walz. It was a major, major boo-boo at the last moment.
He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
It's a damning non-answer for you to not talk about censorship. Obviously, Donald Trump and I think that there were problems in 2020. We've talked about it. I'm happy to talk about it further.
So, overall, what would I say? I would say the forum was not naturally suited to Walz. He was occasionally unfocused, tried to say too much. He did better after the break, but he was never unlikable. He was always very human, if a little bit bumbling. If anything, he was too collegiate occasionally. Online, Republican commentators absolutely adored Vance. They think he wiped the floor with Walz. Slick, well-spoken, confident, cool, those are the words that were bandied around. Yes, that is the ideal for Republican commentators, but is it what the base, as groomed by Trump, is looking for? If Trump models himself to be unconventional and anti-establishment, nothing could have looked more conventional and establishment than Vance tonight. He reeks of the Republican Party that Trump constantly belittled and has largely destroyed. And my hunch is that this performance will really annoy Trump because Vance is so much better at debating than him. A lot of Republican commentators were saying things like Trump should shut up from now on until the election and just let Vance do the talking. This will not go down well with a narcissist. And I don't think it will convert many undecideds. Vance will experience a personal bounce for sure, but that will do him good at the next election, I think. I think Republicans will expect the debate snap polls to give it to Vance sort of 80-20. And I think then the polls will come in and they will be much, much narrower than that. For two reasons. Firstly, because Republican commentators always forget that women watch these things as well. But I think also because when I watched the debate in full, my sense was of an overwhelming Vance dominance. When I passed it issue by issue so that I could comment, I found that Walz had actually won almost every single issue on the substance. And I think that has left a slightly strange view, because you will have viewers who were watching and thinking of the substance and viewers who were watching and thinking of the style, and they will come away with very, very different impressions. So I think actually overall it will come very, very close, much closer than most Republicans online seem to expect, and then they will start, of course, to complain that the moderators hobbled him somehow, that the polls are wrong, that it's the establishment, etc., etc. But actually, I don't think that's the case. And I think even after that, the result will be further ameliorated because Vance said a few outright lies, and those clips of him saying, for instance, he never supported national abortion ban, will be played next to the clips of him saying the opposite, or the claim that Trump said Obamacare will be played next to Trump raging about ending Obamacare. And in this age, the afterlife of a debate are the clips. And strangely, Walz walks away with much better clips. Vance's even manner meant he was extremely dominant overall, but never passionate or punchy or particularly convincing. I would struggle to find a single short clip of his that will go viral in a positive way for them. On the other hand, responding to women dying because they have to travel with a sort of shrug, democracy's messy, will basically become the next Democratic campaign ad.
Governor, I agree with you. Amber Thurman should still be alive, and there are a lot of people who should still be alive, and I certainly wish that she was. On the abortion policy specifically, that we have a big country and it's diverse, and California has a different viewpoint on this than Georgia. Georgia has a different viewpoint from Arizona, and the proper way to handle this, as messy as democracy sometimes is to let voters make these decisions, let the individual states make their abortion policy. And I think that's what makes the most sense in a very big, a very diverse, and let's be honest, sometimes a very, very messy and divided country.
Right, I'm jumping back on after I've done the edit, just to add that I think I was actually quite right. So 2 snap polls have come out, one from CNN and the other one, I think, from, let me check, CBS, I'm pretty sure, who ran the debate. Yeah. And so CBS has it 42 to Vance, 41% to Walz, 17% say a tie. And then the CNN one, which I presume didn't have the option of a tie, has it 51% to Vance, 49% to Walz. So that is exactly what I expected. And as I said at the start, score draw, I'd be pretty happy with that. And I think what you will find in the next few days is that there's a lot of unhappiness in the Trump camp, and that converts into a personal boost for Vance, but actually a slight uptick for Harris overall. Right, it's 5:21 a.m. So to bed with me. If you appreciate our work, you can and should support our work. And you can now do so on ko-fi.com/Quiet Riot Pod with a one-off donation or a small monthly stipend. We are a no-frills outfit. Every penny you give us goes to paying our contributors well, improving our equipment, and making more content for you. I'll drop the link in the show notes. Do give us a few bob if you can. It makes a financial and a psychological difference, especially when one is sleepless. The main episode is out tomorrow. Have a splendid day, my gorgeous Quiet Rioters. Until then. Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Naomi Smith, Alex Andreou and Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangeeta. Artwork by Simona Canellu. Quiet Riot is a co-production with Sandstone Global. Quiet.